Uh, I'll start this not as the moderator, because we discovered that we don't have a moderator.
We expect to be immoderate.
Yes. So the first of the immoderations I've been asked to go first, and I think the plan is that every time we come, don't know what to say, Shabnam will sing something. There are these awkward gaps and pauses. This is what sort of. I think we have once, small thing we have decided on is to, among ourselves, that we'll all say a few words or a few sentences about how we came to Kabir. Because we all come from very different backgrounds. I come from North India. I was exposed to Kabir as a child in school, but in school, everything you read, you dislike. Especially Hindi. Hindi is such a subject, you just hate that subject. Not because it's any fault of Hindi, because they push, the Sur and Kabir and Tulsi, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, and you're just asked to read. It's like exposing British children to Chaucer, when they're 8 years old. But then, Indians being Indians, they do it all the time. Now, it's only when I started writing that when I was 90, I was younger, I was 17 or 18, I started looking at Kabir, and it was not the Hindi, it was some English version of Kabir. And I cannot for the life of me recall what version I was reading. I have a suspicion could have been one of the Bharati Vidya Bhavan volumes on Bhakti literature, and I started looking at the English, and then something started happening, and I thought, let me try and translate some of this into a more contemporary idiom. But then it was the contemporary idiom of a 20-year-old Indian who lived in Allahabad. So I translated some of that, and Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh and Bhupen Thakkar, the two painters, they had a magazine from Baroda called Ruschik. And so they put those translations of these, my reworkings of Kabir in Vrishchik, and Arun Kularkar translated some Janabai and Muktabai, and Geef Patel translated some Gujarati. Then what happened was that in 71, I thought I'd take this Kabir forward. So I arrived in Iowa City. I'm still 24 years old, and I have plans of translating Kabir. But then comes Robert Bly to Iowa City, and he says that he's translating Kabir. And when he goes back to, I think, Minnesota, wherever he was, he sends me the La Bolero Press pamphlet, The Fish in the Water is Not Thirsty. I think that's what it was called, 71, 72. So then I realized that my Kabir dream, my Kabir project is over. I can't compete with Robert Bly. And if Robert Bly was not bad enough, then comes Linda Hess. With the Bichakov Kabir from North Point. And then I decided, okay, my Kabir project is now well and truly over. I try and translate him into contemporary English. And then I'm competing with these two, one an American scholar, the other a rather well-known American poet. So, but I still, kept on. But by then, I got interested in actually reading the text, and there were several good editions. Not only the great Paras Natewari edition didn't have any tika, but there were other editions. One by the Vishwadalaya Press in Varanasi. Thakur Jaydev Singh, is that that edition, and then of course Charlotte Wattwill's book came out. And I kept on translating Kabir, but I think the problem for about 20 or 30 years where I got stuck, I didn't have the language in which to translate him. And I knew that I will not be able to do all the entire poem. I would leave out certain things because either they got too repetitive, or I didn't feel like translating them, or I thought they wouldn't work in an English poem. So that decision took me a long time. The other decision which took me a long time is whether I should introduce words into the poem that did not exist in Kabir's time. So that was, but because there's no halfway house about it. Either you do it or you don't do it. But once I started using words like chromosome or megaphone or deodorant in a Kabir poem, then I decided, okay, if that's the way I'm going, then that's the way I'm going. And I was greatly helped by the oral tradition, because they were constantly introducing words which did not, into Kabir, that certainly did not exist in the 1500s. So I use that example from a Rajasthani singer who's introducing a word like ticket and rail, and you know the great poem that you can buy a ticket either to heaven or to hell. The choice is yours. Something like that.
There's no hell.
There's no hell. Well, the Vaikunt, and there is the.
Just it's that rail ticket that you need.
But that's you need a rail ticket, but the word ticket and rail are both in the poem. So when I thought that the Kabir singers have already got as far as rail and ticket, then adding chromosome and deodorant is only a step. So I was really translating it in the voice of the singer. Only the singing I was doing was more or less in the American idiom. That's the long and short of my Kabir journey.
Okay, well, I am also going to try to briefly tell my Kabir journey. It's very different, here we all are, really, with such different histories. So Kabir is truly global, right? He was intimidated for decades by Robert Bly, from doing Kabir. So I wanted to start the opening comments that I make today with a comment that my main teacher among Kabir singers that I've been among for the last 10 or 12 years said to me one day. He's the person who's on the cover of this book. And how many have heard Prahlad Singh Tipadia on his American tours or in her movies? Yeah. So toward the end of a first 8 or 9 month stay that I had, that I spent a lot of time with him, and it was we were just driving through this dramatically drenched monsoon landscape after an all-night singing fest. And I said, I think I can come back in December because I have it. And he just said this sentence, "Aapke upar Satguru ki badi daya hai," which means the Sadguru has had a lot of mercy or a lot of blessing on you. I said, yes, no. Because, first of all, I consider it just a kind of amazing good fortune that I've followed various unpredictable paths and end up being able to call this my work. Those paths included, religious discontent as a teenager and deciding ahead of the Beatles and the hippies that I needed to go to India, and having an intense interest in poetry, and then learning Hindi by chance because some program I was in set me down in Patna, Bihar. I didn't know the difference between Patna and any place else, but I learned Hindi, and then started finding out about the Bhakti poets. And so there was 4 big names in Hindi Bhakti poetry: Tulsi, Meera, Kabir, and Surdas. I thought someday maybe I could translate them and write an anthology. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get my hands into the language, and I wanted to live with it. But I ended up starting and ending with Kabir. Well, there was a little Tulsidas along the way. That was a kind of another interesting coincidence. But mainly my working life has been spent with Kabir, which is a very big piece of good luck. So, we've been talking about how many people, especially certain kinds of people we could characterize, are drawn either mostly or almost exclusively to the side of Kabir that's very in your face, that's very critical, that's iconoclastic, anti-authoritarian, kicking I shouldn't really use those words, should I? Kicking something of the high authorities, religious hypocrisy and pretension and caste. A lot of us are really drawn to that. And then many, many, many people, most of whom are not at this conference, are drawn to the mystical Kabir, to the Kabir who speaks of a deep, deep meditative experience, of a dedication to experiencing self-knowledge and knowledge of some great reality, and talks about how that might happen and how you might possibly refer to it in language. I was attracted to both. Kabir has all that. Kabir has humor. Kabir has edge. He has a kind of profundity of experience that can take your breath away. And so that was, getting to actually work on that was the second stage of my good fortune. And the last stage, I'm skipping a lot, of course I have pages and pages of notes, I just put them down, was really good fortune, and that was starting around 2002 when I got it into my mind that I wanted to enter the oral traditions. And the Kabir oral traditions have been continuously operating, not only Kabir but many oral traditions in India, since his lifetime. And he, as far as anybody knows, was an oral poet, never wrote anything down. So how do we have hundreds and thousands of poems with his name on them? You know, different people wrote them down, sectarian groups made manuscripts, and then it was on and on, print and so on. And now digital, everything's going on via the web and her films and everything. One day in Malwa, in the country, in the village, somebody said to me, the latest thing in cell phone ringtones is Shabnam singing Kabir. Anyway, the oral tradition deeply transformed my experience of text. I'm a text-trained person, so it's not like I left text study behind, but by immersing myself in songs and in singers, listeners, social contexts, the tremendous complex dynamism that all of that creates, I truly had a new experience of everything, of text, of feeling, of meaning and interpretation. And the key to that, we sometimes say, is embodiment. That is, you're experiencing it in your whole body in a different way than you possibly could if you're reading it on a page. So, I don't know, have I been talking a long time? Yeah. So maybe we shouldn't do a song right now, or what? We were going to do a little bit of a song.
Oh, yes.
There's so many songs that bring forth this fantastic physical imagery of the experience that the poet is referring to. So this is just one of scores that we might have picked on, and it's called, I mean, the first line is, it's about the Guru, and the first line is Mara Sadguru Banya Bhedya, meaning my Sadguru, my true Guru, has become a Bhedya, and Bhedya means one who knows a secret, a Bhed, and it also means one who penetrates, Bhedna. And then how does he explain what that means? He says, Mari nadi re pakari ha. He got hold of my pulse. In the nadi mein leher upje. And in my veins, waves broke open. And in my heart, I was just rocking on those waves. And then my Sadguru showed it to me in my body, gave me knowledge in my body. So we'll just do one little refrain of that, okay? I get to sing even though she's the singer. Mara Sadguru Baniya Bhediya. Is my mic on? Yes. Tumhari nadi re pakdi ha, Mara dil guru baniya bhediya re. Tumhari nadi re pakdi
I guess being able to sing something allows me to go into my journey into Kabir easily, because it's opened up something. I'm a filmmaker, and I think I came to Kabir very briefly to give a little history, very much from a critical social gaze that we were talking about earlier. I was living in Ahmedabad when the Godhra communal riots broke out, and I saw a kind of degree of violence unfolding around me that created a profound loss of meaning for me. As a secular, feminist, left-oriented rationalist, I realized I was on the outside of an experience that was quite visceral and capable of moving people that I had no entry into. And Kabir's voice called out immediately to me, as we've all read Kabir's poems, Sadho dekho jag borana, listen seekers, just look, this world has gone mad. And it sort of resonated very deeply. And I was very drawn as a filmmaker to journeying into Kabir and deploying the voice of Kabir as a social activist to speak to these misguided bigots out there. And very quickly, I was stumped in my tracks by Kabir because he started speaking to me. And my neatly laid out agenda of deploying his voice for people out there kind of started crumbling. And I think the gaze turned in a very sharp way, and I realized that this outward social gaze that Kabir has is as fierce as his inward gaze. And that's what he's constantly urging us towards. That it's not about pointing fingers, it's about looking within and recognizing those fissures in how your ego identity gets constructed and how you're capable of a lot of violence. And showing me that we live in, that the outer and the inner are connected, that they are mirrors of each other, and that the outer is not disconnected from the inner, and that we are part of the problem. So that was a fundamental shift for me, and sort of the moorings of my identity began to kind of unhinge in many ways. And over 6 years I made these 4 films, but I was blessed to be able to journey with a lot of these singers, amazing folk musicians who have, many of whom have really imbibed Kabir very powerfully. And in the course of this gaze of the outsider, which inevitably a camera leads you to have, there was a disquiet and a discontent and a restlessness in me to drop the camera and pick up the tambura, because it somehow felt deeply insufficient to be just documenting these songs. It's like I'm not part of the action. And the rasa of it felt like I was left out of it. I'm left out of a more powerful visceral experience which the oral traditions were offering me. So I used the first available opportunity to do just that. And I think Linda and I have been co-journeyers on this, on these travels, and we both have recognized that there is something else that goes on when poem becomes song or song becomes poem, as in a printed text on paper. And the way I perceive a poem when I read it, I don't necessarily, none of these are hard and fast categories, experience it as a full body experience that a song allows me to do. A song sort of has the capacity to, if necessary, sidestep the devious workings of my mind that are always clutching for meaning, order, control, ordering into dualities. It sidesteps that process, and it has a capacity to awaken something in the body. And what I'd just like to share are a few thoughts of what immersion, in the course of my work as a filmmaker, and subsequently we've been doing other things, immersion in these oral traditions have shown me little insights about the power of songs when they are in motion, from body to body and traveling. And one of the things is, this thought came to me just yesterday because Arvind and I, we were having this conversation over dinner and later with Linda in the car, that a lot of this poetry is repetitive. And that doesn't necessarily serve the purposes of a poet wanting to translate gems and, tarasho and carve it out and bring out core original ideas. And it occurred to me that the function of the oral traditions is actually quite different, because the oral traditions are ritualized enactments of participation in this poetry, right? You go to satsangs, you go to jagrans, you gather in a community of seekers, and you repeatedly sing the same song for, say, 20, 30 years. It's worth reflecting on. What is the difference between reading a poem once and inviting that poem as a song into your system on a repeated ritual basis again and again? Do meanings change? And I think they do. I feel they do. Having had the experience of being able to embody the song as a listener and a singer. And I think these poems, the way they function, these songs, the way they function in the oral traditions, are an act of remembrance, one could say, which is where the function of repetition plays a really important role. You come to this space of the satsang because you want to remember this truth. You want to reenact it, reawaken it in your body through listening and singing. And my friend Parvati Baul, from whom I've learned many of the Baul songs I sing, goes as far as to say in the Baul tradition, this poetry or a song is considered a bij mantra. Okay? It's a seed mantra that is planted in your body, and then it does its work. Okay? And she will even go as far as to say, you don't feel viraha, you don't feel that yearning for mystical union, start singing the song. The song will awaken that feeling in you. So this is a really different universe of meanings and experiences created through the act of embodied song, embodied poem, where there is a lot of repetition with deliberate intent. There is remembrance, and there is, through the act of repeated re-engagement with the same text again and again, I feel the emergence of a kind of rasa, which has a different taste. So that's all I really wanted to share. And the other thought that I could maybe add is, we're all in the business of working with an extremely fluid tradition and fixing it in some way, right? We do it as translators, we do it as filmmakers, we capture something and we make it fixed, exactly. And I just thought I'd like to relate this story to you of a person I met the other day. He's a Sindhi gentleman in his 70s, quite old, Manu Bhatia ji. And he came to one of our satsangs and he showed us a tambura that he inherited from his grandfather, who's a Sindhi. And he said, my grandfather came into the service of a wandering Sufi singer called Isar Lal, who was quite a force to reckon with as a Sufi master in the Indo-Pak border regions of Sindh. And he was deeply drawn to this Sufi and decided to spend his life in service of Isar Lal. And Isar Lal had many followers and disciples, and he issued a diktat to all his followers: do not write down my verse, do not put paper on pen, and do not violate this one diktat I issue. And what happens? Manu Bhatia's grandfather, secretly, he cannot hold himself back, because he says this is amazing poetry and it's going to be lost for generations. He secretly keeps a little diary of Isar Lal's poetry. And Manu Bhatia receives it as inheritance from his grandfather, and it's a yellowed old book with dog-eared pages. And he doesn't know what to do with this legacy. And he walks into the Sindhology Institute in Adipur, Kutch, and he says, I have this. And it creates a flurry of excitement because nobody has any textual record of an amazing Sufi voice, Isar Lal, and they are excited, and of course they all proceed to violate the diktat of their Sufi master, and it's published as a book, which is the industry that we're all in. We're all in the form, in this. So I'd just like us to muse and reflect on this interesting paradox of the idea that why a Sufi master who sings poems like this would not want them documented. And I think the answer is quite obvious. The answer is that when things take shape or form, they accrue to them corruptions of ego, right? It could be individual ego of authorship. It could be collective egos of religions that encrust around a mystic's voice, as we have seen happen in the history of humankind again and again and again. And that it's also a beautiful reflection of the content of the spiritual poetry, which constantly invites us to reflect on death and on the ephemeral nature of everything. And that it's beautiful because it arises in a moment and dies and is allowed to die and is not clung upon by our insecure identities and egos which need something to cling to. And that's the core of what the Sufi is telling you, or Kabir is telling you. Burn the house, have the courage to let go. So I think it's an ironical thing and something for us to keep in mind as we translate and document. And currently my work with my team is to create a web archive. So we're putting oral traditions, fixing them in some way in order to share the spirit and the beauty of the oral traditions with audiences through the internet.
And I could add that to this irony, which once you start thinking about it, it will multiply quite a bit, that I spent 12 years studying oral traditions and what emerges from it. I was teased about that, you know. People were always quoting to me a line like "Main kehta aankhon ki dekhi, tu kehta kagaz ki leki, tera mera manwa ek kaise hoye re," which means this would be Kabir. I say what I've seen with my own eyes. You say what's written on paper. How is your mind and mine ever going to meet?
And I think if I just share one more anecdote from the oral traditions, is the beauty of these oral traditions is how fluid they are in terms of people, like Arvind pointed out, singers and performers and scores of anonymous poets inspired by Kabir feel completely entitled to participate in the oeuvre, and it's a growing body of verse over the years. And it is with a complete sense of, there's no apology about it. In fact, they look at you rather pityingly if you are in search of the authentic Kabir text. You know, it's like, you missed the point, numbskull. To take a phrase from Linda's translation of a Kabir song. And I'd just like to share with you one late night journey after a long night program with Prahlad Tipania ji in a car. And it's almost 2 in the morning, and there is another singer, wonderful Malvi singer called Arun Goel in the car. And it turns out that evening Prahlad ji had sung a Kabir bhajan, which has this beautiful line. It says, "Jajo jajo re bhai mara jajo ina samundar par." Go my brother, go my friend, go across the 7 seas. Motira lajo re anabindya. Bring back a pearl that's not pierced. Okay? And Arun Goel, that's what Prahlad ji sang. Arun Goel was saying, you know, when I sing this song, I say, Motira lajo anabhinja. Bring back a pearl that's from the sea that is not drenched, that's untouched by the waters of the sea. And what unfolded was this really beautiful conversation between many people in the car who debated the possible meanings of Anabindya versus Anabhinja. And it's evident that Anabindya is a rich idea as a metaphor for a pearl that is not strung into a necklace of, or a framework of meaning, or a framework which is defined and thereby tied down. So be free. And there are many, many, many metaphors in Kabir poems which evoke this idea, like an akshar jisko laghuna matra. Seek that alphabet which has neither a short or a long vowel attached to it. That it stands alone. It's not been strung into even a word. So the implication of unbhinjya, unwrenched, is again evident to those who are floating or swimming in the meanings of the poetic metaphoric meanings of Kabir. Bhavsagar, the ocean of becoming, is this sansarik dunya in which we are all immersed. And the invocation constantly is to be in this dunya but not clinging to it and messing with it and just attached in horrible, violent ways, violent to yourself and to others. So Anbhinjya evokes that meaning, and everybody agreed that both versions should be sung.
Can you sing a little bit more before? We'll need to open it up to people pretty soon, but if
I
you
think
could
we should
sing
open it. Let's
up.
open it up. Let's open it up.
And will you sing at least once more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I thought that was speaking for everybody. Oh, you didn't get a chance last time, so can we pass this back? Thank you.
I have a question regarding the curricula of schools in India. Has Kabir entered those curricula nowadays, and in which form? Is it in the textual printed form, or are they also doing these as songs, being sung, the texts?
No, I think he's always been part of the Hindi undergraduate and postgraduate curriculum. So that's and they all and it entered and school, college, and postgraduate. And
I grew up
research.
learning song and poem in school.
So
and
he's part of the curriculum. Only the songs that they were talking about, they may not have entered the curriculum.
Oh, but they get it all by text. They don't bring a singer into the classroom.
they
They
don't.
don't listen to
Right.
music
Yeah,
and learn to
yeah.
sing it. It's all by text, and they
So-
are asked to memorize some couplets.
And yeah, it's all text based, and the tikas and the explanations, and they just reproduce that in the class. The idea that they have the basis of these texts is actual performance and song. That I don't think has still penetrated the Indian classroom. Even though the songs in the Granth Sahib, they're all given by rag. Isn't that so?
In some of the
In
collections.
some of the
Not all,
collections,
yeah.
but there are sort of so they're all meant to be sung, and the ragas are specified in which they are. But that whole aspect of Kabir, I don't think is taken up in the Indian classroom.
I think it would be quite challenging for the Indian school system to open its doors to the oral traditions of Kabir for many reasons, because it also challenges the hegemony of the kind of Hindi that is taught in our curricula, because Kabir flows in many, many, many dialects. And let us not forget that Kabir's voice and body of verse has been kept alive by and large by Dalit communities in our country, primarily by Dalit communities, and there are definitely caste politics at work in allowing Dalit classroom into singers into government classrooms. I know because both Linda and I have been part of assisting some such school interventions in Malwa, Madhya Pradesh, and these are the kind of issues that come up. But yes, Kabir has always been part of textbooks, but in an extremely unimaginative way. Which is why most of us come out of the Indian school system hating Kabir. It's like, oh, that preacher and that fellow who will tell me how to live my life.
But another problem with our experiment with bringing some singers into the classroom, actually because this tradition is so well known in Malwa, that I didn't detect serious prejudice against the Dalit singers, but although it may have been there. But what we did get was, we don't have the time. We are preparing these students for exams. When are we going to fit in this fluff, this frivolous thing?
Yes, can you?
I had a,
Okay, and then if you pass it to the back
Okay.
after you're finished.
thank you. I just wanted your opinion, each of you, since you invoke the Sadguru during the song, or maybe before satsang, and you do this repetition in remembrance of this bij or bij mantra, doesn't it then become Chaitanya? That is my question. Isn't it become an enlivened mantra? And from that, you can become the embodiment that you spoke of.
You can be the embodiment that
Do you think the bij mantra becomes a Chaitanya mantra, an enlivened mantra?
Yes. I mean, one very simple way of answering that question would be to say yes.
But it's not controlled by some guru who is whispering it necessarily into your ear. Anybody can sing it.
You know, in the course of these, the research and conversations with many singers, I would often hear them say, "Hum bhi Kabir hain." You know, and initially I would find that idea really bizarre. I couldn't plug into. Yeah, I'm myself Kabir. I mean, you're in search, you're a researcher, and you're here trying to study and understand Kabir. Talk to me, I'm Kabir. You know, and I would say, what? What do you mean? I was like, and I think it took me a little while to recognize that when people participate in the oral traditions of Kabir, they're not, I mean, the historic figure Kabir has really faded. I mean, he's really, Kabir is a knowledge stream. And an experiential knowledge stream that you can partake of. And through these songs, you can awaken what I think people recognize as a Kabirian spirit in you. And you can feel that expanded sense of self that he talks about in his poems. So in that sense, yes.
Yes, can you just move a little forward so we can see you?
Thanks, Shabnam, for drawing our attention to the paradox of trying to capture an oral tradition in, text in Arvind and Linda's case and video in your case. And I was wondering if you could all speak a little bit to the ways in which, knowing that that's a structural limitation, right? You're translating a live tradition into a fixed form. How do you still sort of try to capture some of the multiplicity of the oral tradition in text and in video?
You haven't had a turn.
No, you see, I'm not thinking of the oral tradition when I'm translating. I'm only looking at the text. So I lay, I keep the oral tradition and the various texts. I look at that. You see, there's enough happening in the text without complicating it with the oral tradition. If you look at there are if you look at the Parashnatavadi editions, each word would be different, and there'll be three different alternatives. Or this is in the Bijak it is like this, in the Granth Sahib it is like this, in the Dadul Pandit it is like this. It is some printed manuscript, it is like this, and in the publications of the Belvedere Press, it is yet another. So you are dealing with all those things in one line, or three lines, or four lines. Now, if you get, then it's impossible to do. Then you get into the oral variations of that. For one, they were not available. For each poem, one can't be seeking the oral tradition sources, but. So those are things one keeps aside, and then one works with the text, and very often there are other translations which you have to. So I think I kept the oral tradition, the living oral tradition aside. What I was aware of is that always that this is coming from the oral tradition, but it is coming to me as a text with the variations of the oral tradition marked in the text. And so that is the material I was dealing with, which gave me enough leeway to use one word rather than another word. Because the same poem may have, the same word may have appeared, or a different word may have appeared using the same image. As the example, whether it's pierced or it is drenched. So those variations, that happens in every song. Most songs will come with those variations. So that gave me the freedom to introduce yet a third variation. That's what I was saying.
So just because we're so enthusiastic about the oral tradition, doesn't mean that we hate texts, you know? So one time when I was in the middle of this project, I met this European scholar who's a very textual-based person, and my earlier work was on text, and he looked at me sort of mournfully, and he said, "Why have you abandoned text?" I said, "I haven't abandoned text." So there's a lot of reference to texts and orality. I try to create a conversation in this book. And, you know, human beings, that's what we do. We collect things, we make texts, we make artifacts, then we blow them up. So it's interesting.
And many of the texts are coming from the oral space as well. Many of the printed editions are collections that came, so it's all interpenetrating. But I'll very quickly answer that specific question by saying that we are in the midst of constructing a large web space called Ajab Sheher, which means wondrous city. It's a Kabirian phrase, where we are putting out 13 years of documentation in the oral traditions of Kabir and other bhakti voices, Sufi and to some extent Baul. And we're doing what the web allows us to do, which is that if you search in Ajab Sheher for Jhini Jhini Bini Chadariya, you would be led to a page where it would pull up, say, 5 versions of Jhini Jhini Bini Chadariya, one sung in Rajasthan, one sung in Kutch, one sung in Pakistan, some sung by the same singer in entirely different settings with totally different results and moods, because the mahal changed, the setting changed, the audience was different, the energy was different, with translations that are also multi-vocal. We hope to have multiple translating voices there as well. So that's the closest we can come to sharing this dynamism of the oral traditions.
Okay, look, it's on its way.
Well, listening to this wondrous conversation, I can't help notice that this implied contrast between oral tradition and text-based translations, really, you know, the differences dissolve when you begin to talk about sound. And we haven't yet heard about the importance of sound, or how sound guides your translations. Because poetry was never meant to be read or silently. It's not a silent form any more than music is. It's just a recent phenomenon that we've got that, but surely Kabir, or the work you've done, sound must play. We talked about images, we talked about finding the right words, syntax, things like that. But can you share a bit about how sound informs the way you translate, and especially, Linda, your experience with the oral tradition? How has that changed your translation or not?
Yeah, it's changed, but I'm sure that Arvind would say that he's listening, as a poet, he's listening to the sound of the language always. Would that be correct? I mean, poetry is very much made of sound, so even before I was working on oral tradition, when I was translating text, always I was listening to the sound in Hindi and to the sound of what I was creating in English. But now that I've hung out with people like this and that, you know, if I'm stuck on a translation, I just walk around the room and sing for a while and I'll get a breakthrough. And sound is actually a very important idea and metaphor in Kabir and the Sant poets. That is, they have this idea of the nad, of the inner sound, which is beyond all sounds, and that you better hear it, even though you can never really get it between your ears, but you should hear it.
No, I think I'll take just a minute to retune, so please, let's take some more questions.
Okay.
I'll tune up.
When we grew up in schools, we were more used to very basic sayings of Kabir, like ऐसी वाणी बोलिए मन का आपा हो और इनको शीतल करे आपन शीतल हो. So we learned very basic, and they were so delightful and understandable at that age. But yet now I have a quest, after listening to her song, for more of the next level. And I think she answered the question that you've come up with the website. I was going to ask her, do you have DVDs here for sale tonight or CDs?
The answer is yes.
We do
Great.
have the films and the music. It's all available at the
Excellent. And is the website live, is my question.
No, not yet. But by the end of the year, it will be.
Thank you.
But many pieces of it are on YouTube.
Yes, actually, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I should say that we've started a YouTube channel called Ajab Sheher, where we've started uploading the content that would eventually come into the website. So you can start browsing there.
And there are a number of books over there, so as long as we still have the speakers around.
AJAB, Ajab Sheher, SHAHAR.
So Linda, what's the book that you're voting for?
Oh, and Linda's book is called Bodies of Song,
Bodies of Song.
and Arvind has a bunch of books in the bookstore. So, and you can all buy them. We don't really have time for more questions, unfortunately, so we'll have time for a song. Then I'll just fill in all this time with all the other stuff I would normally say to you, like, you can leave this way, please take all your belongings, and if you don't, we'll put them on the chair outside the door and you can come get them. Library services are going to be closing down at their usual Sunday time, so if you need to borrow a book or something like that, do it in between. The cafe will close as well. I think it's 6, but maybe sooner than that.
What about the Jaipur Festival bookstore?
Oh, all the festival stuff will be open until later. So that won't change, it's just the library. And if you've enjoyed your time at the festival, please be an ambassador of the festival and tell other people about it so that we can continue. Okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, Shabnam's going to sing a very delightful song now called Sahib Ne Bhang Pilai, which bhang is a delicious marijuana concoction. So it's in honor of that of being the state of Colorado. But this is a spiritual drunkenness, don't get me wrong. The Lord has given me a delicious, intoxicating drink is the main line here.
Sahib ne bhang pilai, akhiyon mein lalan chhai. My eyes are cast over with a
Red glow.
red glow.
If you pick up the refrain, sing along.
Yeah, it's a really simple song. पीकर प्याला हुआ दीवाना घूम रहा जैसे मतवाला. Having drunk of this cup, I'm on a high. I'm roaming around in a drunken.
I'm staggering.
Yeah. Janam janam ka tala khul gaya. The lock of ages has sprung open. Mere jyot lagi ghat mahi, and there is a light in my body. झाड़ बिंद और जीव चर अचर में फूल रहा मेरा साईं. In everything, wherever I look, inanimate, inanimate and moving and still, I see that divinity. I see that Lord.
Ful raha, blooming.
गुरु रामानंद तुमरी बलिहारी सिर पर ठोकर ऐसी दीनही. Kabir says, I surrender to this, my Guru Ramanand, because he gave me such a knock on the head. Sahib Kabir bakshish kar lo ye agam bani gai. You translate that.
Well, bakshish is a little hard, but anyway, Kabir asks for this blessing, singing Agambani, that endless word.
साहिब तुम्हारी साहिबी सब घट रही समाय. जो मेहंदी के पात में लाली लखी नहीं जाए. Oh God, oh Lord, your divinity permeates every body, just like the red color latent in the green henna leaf. You can't see it, but it's there, and it can manifest. Lali mere lal ki oh ji, jit dekhu titla.
these are the preliminary couplets that precede the main song. Let's not translate it. We're running out of time. Chalo.
साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में अलालन छाई। साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में अलालन छाई। साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। सतगुरों ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। Feel free to join in if you want to clap or sing along in the refrain. अरे पीकर प्याला हुआ दीवाना, घूम रहा जैसे मतवाला। अरे घूम रहा जैसे मतवाला। पीकर प्याला हुआ दीवाना, घूम रहा जैसे मतवाला। अरे घूम रहा जैसे मतवाली। मेरा जन्म जन्म का ताला खुल गया, जन्म जन्म का ताला खुल गया। मेरे चौथ लगी घट माई, अखियों में लालन छाई। यो चौथ लगी घट माई, अखियों में लालन छाई। साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। अखियों में लालन छाई। अरे प्राण बिंद अरे जीवन चराचर में भूल रहा मेरा साईं। हाँ भूल रहा मेरा साईं। हाँ प्राण बिंद अरे जीवन चराचर में भूल रहा मेरा साईं। हाँ भूल रहा मेरा साईं। अरे जहाँ देखूं वो रीता नहीं, हाँ जहाँ देखूं वो खाली नहीं। यहाँ सब घट रहा समाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। यहाँ सब घट रहा समाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। साहिब ने भांग पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। हाँ साहिब नान पिलाई, अखियों में लालन छाई। अखियों में लालन छाई। अरे गुरु रामानंद तुम्हारी हो बलिहारी, सिर पर ठोकर ऐसी दीनी। अरे सिर पर ठोकर ऐसी दीनी। अरे गुरु रामानंद तुम्हारी हो बलिहारी, सिर पर ठोकर ऐसी दीनी। हाँ सिर पर ठोकर ऐसी दीनी। हाँ साहिब कबीर बख्शीश कर लो,